Okay, this will be a shorter video, and that's not because what we are going over today is easy to understand or simple to just kind of glance over, but rather because there is so much covered in set standardization that it's something that I cannot fully explain in just one lecture, or even, 2 days worth of lectures. If I was to print out the CAD standardization document from the National CAD Standards, it would be about roughly almost 600 pages. So we are not going to have a printed copy of it. It is something that we can just reference online. And we're going to go over some of the highlights and why it's important to kind of use and reference back and forth with. So the one of the important things to also keep in mind with the National CAD Standards is that they are voluntary. However, the purpose for CAD standards is to streamline and simplify the exchange of building in design and construction, because of the fact that if every designer is showing and referencing different materials or different measurements in a different way, then it's going to make it really confusing to actually construct a building. So the National CAD Standards came about to have one set way that all designers agree on representing materials and how a drawing is going to be dimensioned and how everything's going to be laid out on a set of construction documents, so that this way it can get done faster because there's no guessing of where something should go or which material should I use. Because if everything's standardized, we can just refer back to the standards for how to represent something. So it's going to come out faster, and then it's also going to be a lot easier for the people constructing the building to be able to interpret the drawings into the actual building itself. That consistency across different designers then also helps people work together much easier. So if I was working as the architect and I was sharing my files with the interior designer, they don't have to sit and try to decode anything regarding the symbols I'm using or the layers that I'm using in my drawing. If everyone's using the same standards, then it can be understood a lot easier as we go across. So the National CAD Standards are just a partnership between those design professionals and the construction professionals, and also included in it are the people who are developing software. So Autodesk themselves play a huge part in the CAD standards and making sure that things are accessible in their software, particularly when it comes to BIM software like Revit. So BIM is building information modeling, and Revit has a lot of the CAD standards built into it automatically to kind of help streamline that process even more. So what are some of these standards? So they're broken down into different subsets. So first we have our layers in CAD, and we'll look at AutoCAD a little bit in this recording just to understand what those layers are and what they do. But their purpose is to reduce that document preparation time and help coordinate documents across a set. So with the use of layers, I can have one single CAD document hold all of the information, and then my layers can be turned on or off in the software to kind of help reduce what I'm looking at, and that way I can have just one file with all the information and then just only turn layers on and off for what I need to see at the moment or in a particular view. And then we also have uniform drawing standards, so that goes over the different drawing sets that would exist, as well as the symbols that are used, and a lot more in terms of abbreviations and just different terminology in drawings. And then included in the standards as well is how to take the current CAD standards that exist and then introduce them into a BIM workflow, because Revit does work, like I said, a lot, not a lot different. I don't want to say it's a completely different software, but it is a different software, and so the way the work process is kind of streamlined in Revit then requires a little bit of a different way to implement the standards, but our abbreviations and our symbols would stay the same. And then also guidelines for how to plot or print our drawings are all included in these standards. So you can access the National CAD Standards through their website. You would have to, so let me log out. So if I go to their website, you do need to purchase a license to be able to officially access all of the standards. As a student, a license costs, I believe, $100. We can double check that right here. But as you can see, the licenses are not cheap. So yes, as a student, to order a single license is $100, and that gives you access to the CAD standards. I already have a license, and I'm not going to go through all of everything in here with you, but we are going to look at some of it so you can understand why you may find it a good investment to purchase a license, to just kind of have all of this database at your fingertips, particularly if you are a architecture student or an interior design student. It would also be something that you could, when you go file for your taxes, since you're doing this for an academic purchase, it would be something you can write off on your taxes. I'm like 99% sure, however. I am not an accountant, so if you do get arrested by the IRS, it is not my fault. But on this site then, it just has a big old database for layers and how they work, and then a huge part of the CAD Standards database is in this uniform drawing systems. So this goes over everything for drawing sets and how they should be coordinated and how they should be named even in a file versus how to organize your different sheets. So we're going to look at just some of the highlights in this presentation, and then there are also in some cases on the website too, downloads available to again help streamline the process. So there are files you can download for AutoCAD to streamline putting some symbols in there, and then there are downloads for using Excel spreadsheets to make things like schedules, or just to access a lot of the information that's on this site but offline, and we'll look at some of those. I have a couple of them open too. So first off, we're just going to speak on drawing systems and a lot of that stuff that's in that uniform drawing system section, and then we'll go back to AutoCAD and the CAD format at the very end. But in the drawing systems, we have our drawing sets, which is just identifying our different types of drawings and our different styles and the hierarchy of them and how those sheets are going to be listed. So in a previous lecture, we went over like the title block and how sheets are going to get identified, and so we'll look back at that a bit today. And then how our sheets get set up, how a schedule would be put together, and abbreviations and symbols that would be used in drawings. So for a drawing set, one thing that always has to be kept in mind is that it does have to be something that is flexible and adaptive to the project size and scope. So if I am designing a 2-bedroom cabin for a lake house versus if I'm designing a mall that's going to go in Charlotte, those are going to be two different drawing sets, and some of them will need multiple sheets in all of these areas. And then so if I'm doing like a big mall, I'll need a lot of sheets and I'll need a lot of information. But if I'm doing just, a 1-story cabin, then I'm not going to need a whole big 1,000-page drawing set. So we do need to kind of adapt it into those areas. But each style of drawing is kind of segregated into a discipline for what type of drawing it's going to be a part of, And then it's also going to be then divided further into a subset from there. So we want to try to order these subsets and these areas into the sequence of construction. So that's why usually things like our surveying and then our civil style drawings, our landscaping, these are going to be first in the set, our structural stuff, and then our architecture and our interiors, and then our plumbing, mechanical, electrical, things like that. So when they're organized in order of the drawing set, we're going to have them in order of construction, and then we go from general information to specific. So if you think back to when we looked at the plans for Watauga High School, the floor plans were even laid out in which we had the overall first floor, the overall second floor, and then the overall third. And then after that, in the set list, it then had the first wing of the first floor, the second wing of the first floor, the third wing of the first floor. So each time it went from just a general to then more specific in each area. You're also then going to have different drawing sets for different parts of kind of the construction process, or rather just the building process. So you'll have first procurement drawings, which are drawings issued for bidding or negotiating a project before any official agreement is signed. And then you'll have contract drawings, which are drawings that describe the work and the scope of the project, and resource drawings, which show the existing conditions or new construction related to the work, but are not included in the specific contract. And you'll also have an addenda or modification drawings, which would be known as supplemental drawings that would come after the fact. So on each of these sheets in those various areas, you will have it set up with your title block again on the right side vertically down your page. And then a good way to lay out your drawing is to grid out the drawing into separate areas. So then you can designate that a floor plan drawing is going to go in, square A1, and it'll take up until X amount of area. Or the schedule will start in square C1 and then go throughout a different area. So this establishes a graphical layout that is going to then divide the sheet into drawing areas and a title block area, and then any production data. So things like notes and features will come here on this side of the drawing. In the CAD standards, so if we go back into the CAD standards and we look at in drawing set organization, so we have then again telling us our different sheet identifiers, and then the different big or the different subsets, as well as then with numbering your sheets. And again, this is something we went over previously, but I do just want to hit on it again because it is something that we need to look at multiple times in order to know. And that's again why I think having this reference from this website is great to have as an architecture or a design student, because then you don't have to memorize it. You can just look back and reference it. And it has subsets as well as then those sheet types. So the letter first just is the designator, and then the first number will tell you the types of drawings that are on there. And then after that, the numbers will tell you kind of which area or which level of detail it is in the overall set of plans. Now, included for an offline version, that's the wrong file, so excuse me. Or did I not open it? Or does this one not have? I believe it does. Oh, whoops. I thought that one had a download to it, but it doesn't. Oops, my mistake, sorry. But we also then have some examples of different sheet numbers and what would probably be located on that sheet. So if you had a sheet that had just labeled general and it's sheet 1, it's most likely going to be like a table of contents. Versus if I had, and I'll scroll down, architecture 101 would be the site plan, and then architecture 102 would most likely be a floor plan. Now maybe you don't have a site plan sheet, so then you would just start with your first floor on 101. So the numbering system is a convention that we want to use, but again, it's not a hard and fast rule. Everything ultimately in the CAD standards is a suggestion, but having everything standardized and everyone using the same system, again, is going to make things a little bit easier when it comes to your drawing sets. Additionally, with these blocks of areas for which types of drawings go where, there is in our sheet organization specific information about your title block and how your title block can be laid out, as well as where different notes should go, and then suggestions of, and it might be on the next page. Well, no, that's just my sheet sizes. Well, there are somewhere here in these files that represents like, oh, schedules should often be found in this particular area versus floor plans should be located in this area. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule because you can absolutely move like your details and your schedules around to whatever suits the drawing best. But again, if a contractor is familiar with looking in one particular place for all information, it makes it easier if all of the drawings are laid out that way. Now, when it comes to schedules, a schedule is essentially an Excel sheet. It is just a data set of information depending on what it's representing. Like if it is representing different concrete forms or different doors or different windows or finishes of the walls, floor finishes, whatever it might be, something where there's going to be a lot of information needed, but it's going to be too much to put in a particular drawing, we can find all of that listed in schedules. So what the CAD standards offer is information about how these schedules should be formatted, and then additionally a Excel sheet that then has blank ones for you to use and fill in with information. So there's several different tabs at the bottom in the Excel sheet that then can offer, okay, here's a blank door schedule, and then I can fill it in with what the door is tagged with in the drawing. So we looked at those drawings and we saw the different symbols, and so if it's tagged as, door 101 or 102, we can fill that mark in here, and then our width, our height, our thickness, the material it's made out of, if it has several layers to it, glazing, if it has a louver, which is like the little ventilation portion of the door. And sometimes in these areas of a schedule, things might be left blank. So if that part isn't on my door, if my door doesn't have a vent part to it, then I'm not going to put information in here. Sometimes if my door doesn't have a window to it, I'm not going to have anything related to like the glazing in the frame or in the door. So that's going to be particular to each door. Not every single column has to be filled in a schedule. And you can, again, depending on the scope of the project, some parts can be removed out of the schedule, or you could just use the completely blank schedule and just leave areas blank if information isn't going to be used. So within this file, you'll just have different blank schedules that you can fill in. Now, in a Revit environment, you are going to have schedules built into the software. So you still have to determine which columns, which pieces of information you want in a schedule, but it's then going to fill your information in for you. So all I have to say is that I want a window schedule, and then I want it to give me information regarding the window tag, the width of the window, the height, the material, all of that stuff, and then it'll fill it in automatically because Revit will already have the information stored about that window. So it's going to help streamline that process versus within AutoCAD, I would have to go and fill in some of my schedule stuff manually depending on the type of blocks that I'm using for my drawing. So that's one wonderful thing about the schedules in here, is that a lot of it can be just filled or found for us. And there's lots of different ones available. And then also covered in the CAD standards are some of the drafting conventions that we have spoken about in class at length. So standards about laying out your drawings on the page and what scale to typically use. So they are in the CAD standards that floor plans are typically at a 1/4 inch scale or an 1/8 of an inch scale. Again, going to depend on the scope of the project, of how big the building is or in how big of a sheet you're using. Standards related to your different line types, standards related to your different material hatches and dimension setup, depending on if it is wood construction or masonry construction, and different notations that can be used as well. So that also is all what can be found in the CAD standards. So we have information regarding how to set up our drawings, where north arrows should be used. So the most common orientation is to have the north arrow towards the top of the drawing, but sometimes that sometimes isn't allowed. So therefore we can use true north versus assumed north. And it goes over then how to even put in your title underneath your drawing. So how that should be laid out for each drawing should have a number designator and a drawing title and then a scale identifier. And if it's a plan style drawing, there should be a north arrow and where it should be located in reference to that. If you were to grid out your drawing, so if it's a very large floor plan, we might use a grid to then help identify smaller areas a bit easier. And so using numbers versus letters and how that can then be laid out on a specific grid for your coordinates, as well as then our different scales and which scales should be used and which scales are commonly used and where they're commonly used. So again, going to be highly dependent on the scope of the project. So for instance, if I'm doing a site plan, I'm going to use a large scale, but depending on how big the piece of land I have is, I can do anything between 1 inch equals 30 feet versus 1 inch equals 5,000 feet, because some pieces of land are going to be larger than others, and the just common scales that we would use for different areas. And the different line weights or the different thicknesses of our lines we would lose in areas, and our different line types and hatch patterns. All of that is defined in our CAD standards. And it's stuff too that we have been going over in class a little bit. And I do want to, when we get to it, look at some of the symbols and just review a few symbols that I noticed were a little wonky on some of your hand drawings, which it's okay that they were slightly wonky. In some cases, though, some of you guys were very off, so I do want to go over some of those ones. And it's not the end of the world that they were off because you are learning, but so I just know now a little bit more what to highlight for you. Additionally, in the CAD standards is a really long list of different abbreviations and terminology that is preferred for drawings. And so that can all be found, and I'll go to the top in my terms and abbreviations section, where we then have our various terms, and there is at the top just a nice convenient bar for me to be able to go see the term, the abbreviation that's typically used, and then any other terms that might also use that same abbreviation, just because there are multiple abbreviations used for some parts and pieces. And additionally, then there is an Excel sheet that you can download and just have for offline use that has the terms and the abbreviations that are used. And you can just then in here use Control F to search, or just scroll through to find the ones that you're looking for. And then there's also preferred terms versus what is like a kind of slang or other way you could say something. So for instance, drywall is not something that we really have a preferred term in our drawings, but it would instead be gypsum board, or gypsum wall board would be what is preferred. So you just kind of always want to make sure if you are writing out notes or you are using leaders to point to things for annotations, you want to make sure you're using preferred terminology. And so you can look up any preferred terms through here. Whoops. Oh no, there we go. It's important to make sure that we're using consistent terms and consistent abbreviations, because I know I have very much been on the side of reading an abbreviation and going, what the heck is that? I have no idea what ELK is supposed to mean. I don't even know if ELK is an abbreviation, if I'm honest. And so I'll look at drawings and I'll say, I don't know what that means. And it's okay that I don't know what it means, because I have this right here, and I can go to the letter E, and I'm going to go to the abbreviation list, and I'm going to go to E, and there's not even an ELK, so good thing I don't know it. But maybe I see something on a wall and it says EHD, and I have no idea what that means. I can just come here and I can say, oh, it's an electric hand dryer. Okay, now I understand it. So no one is expecting you to memorize every single abbreviation that exists in this list, and it's why this all-encompassing list exists, so that way you can reference it. And there are going to be ones that you do start memorizing. So if I see the abbreviation GWB, which they don't actually have in here. Whoop. They just have it as gypsum board here. So I would do it as GWB, so maybe I'm doing it wrong, or I could be doing it in an outdated way too, because maybe I'm just getting old now. But if I see the abbreviation CMU, because I know that one will be on here, that's for sure. How is a C? There it is. I just can't find it. So then it just means a concrete masonry unit. So I can use that search function at the top. I can also use Control F or Command F on my keyboard, and I can then search for, PT. And it says that this is on here 64 times, so I might have to go through quite a bit to find the one that I'm looking for. I believe if you put it in quotation marks, it only looks for directly that. Or I think maybe it's just looking for those question marks. But you can use the search there to find abbreviations. Or maybe you know exactly what you're looking for, but you just don't know the abbreviation. So if I just search for paint, I can then find things related to paint a lot easier for my particular drawing. And so this can be found on the website as well as then in that Excel sheet that you can download with your license. But if we have that consistent terminology, then everyone can be on the same page in our drawing. And then our symbols used in our drawings, which are that graphic representation of either relating to different views or the pieces of furniture or built-ins of our building. So the things such as our plumbing, our mechanical systems, our electrical systems, all of those are going to have different symbols that we put in our drawings. And without consistency across the line of what symbols are being used to represent different things, it'll almost be like decoding a piece of art to try to figure out, okay, what exactly do they mean when they have this sitting on the drawing? Now, we can then just standardize that this symbol here is the symbol for toilets, or this here is for couches, and this here is how to symbolize the different elevations or the different heights when we're in a section view or an elevation view for like our first floor or second floor and our third floor. And then we also have symbols for referencing additional views in our drawings. For instance, this right here, all three of these would be just different interpretations of an interior elevation. And so that's what some of you did a little wonky, in that this was also just drawn incredibly awkwardly onto the circle. And I know sometimes it's really hard to get tangent lines on circles, but for some of you it came out like really pointy, and it should be a little bit more gentle than that. But then this is just telling us the sheet number to go look at and then the view identifier on that sheet. And depending on how many interior elevations are done of a single room is going to depend on how many little pointed pieces you can put on. So it can go all the way from just having a single one to all four completing a diamond on each side. This would be for an exterior elevation. And so this is saying go look at view A4 on sheet A201 and you'll see the outside of the building facing this direction from the floor plan. So this would show me my south facade of the building. Now, again, symbols, like I said, are kind of almost like a little code to simplify the drawings. And if we're not all using a consistent set of symbols, then it can make it pretty difficult to create drawing sets. So in the CAD standards, there is templates for our different symbols, as well as then a symbol library. And so if I was ever unsure of what symbol to use for laying out a property line or putting in elevations or an interior elevation, I can come here and I can Control F. I don't know why it keeps searching for CMU. Interior. And then I can see here are the symbols to use for an interior elevation, whether I'm doing 2, 3, 4, or just a single one versus an exterior elevation. And then even broken up in excruciating detail how to lay out a title block, how to lay out a door tag. Additionally, what's wonderful in the CAD standards is there is this download to have all of these symbols on file for an AutoCAD drawing. And so if I was creating a set of drawings, and we'll go over AutoCAD in a little more towards the end of this lecture, and then we'll start in detail in the next one. But in AutoCAD, I have these features that are called blocks. And within blocks, I can easily go look through my library of different of different areas. And so since I have mine, I have my little boop boop boop. I have my symbols library downloaded. And I can just say, go look in this folder, and I can take these blocks from here and put them in my drawing. So what this is going to allow me to do is add in an elevation marker. So I can just click on it from here and then click to place it in my drawing. And then it also is going to be dynamic in that I can put in the view number and the sheet number. So if I wanted to say this is sheet 202, I can click OK, and now this symbol is filled in. And if I wanted to replace it, I could just double click on it, and then I can change its value to, instead of being 202, I can say, oh, this is actually sheet 203, and now it'll change in there. So instead of having to draw all of these different symbols into my drawing manually, I can just place it in there. If I don't have 4 views that I want, I can get rid of view markers, or if I scroll down more, it'll have the ones where it's not all 4. So I can then put these dynamic blocks in rather than having to write all of the information about my view number, my view title, and my scale. Rather than draw each one individually, I can easily just take them out of these folders and place them into my drawing. So it will, again, will help kind of streamline the process. They do claim that everything is named conveniently in the folders. I would not say that. I would say that like it does follow a good numbering convention for like the file names, but I wouldn't necessarily call things convenient. You can rename any of these files in here, and you can rename the folders after you unpack them all, but I do think it's absolutely better than me having to go and personally draw any of this stuff in, is that I can just go say, well, this is what I need to show the sealant behind this brick, and then I can be able to just easily plop that into my drawing, then have to draw it all in myself manually on the computer. But we have our symbol library, and it's broken down into different areas too, so you don't have to scroll through the entire one. You can just go quickly to the furnishings, and then you can see just the various symbols that are used for furniture. And again, not required to use this specific symbol. However, to simplify it for everyone involved, if we all use the same symbols, that would make it easier for everyone around. And then there's just a general index too, so we can just search for, I want to search for a toilet, so I'm going to go T for toilet. Oh, would they call it a water closet? I bet they call it a water closet. Yeah, they love calling toilets water closets. And so then I can just go find the different symbols that can be used for different types of toilets, whether or not it has a tank or the tank is hanging on the wall. The tank, integral tank, different types of toilets get different symbols. Different water closets, excuse me. So all of our different symbols can be found through there. Again, not a comprehensive list that you are expected to memorize in one go, but rather a reference to use in sets of drawings. Adding in notations is also included. So notes on large projects, there'll be several sheets, several architectural size sheets on like a 24 by 36 page that will just be filled with notes. And those notes are going to have all of the information about construction, and then there's also going to be notes in addition on other sheets that will be located next to the title block for identifying different symbols, or to just specify where schedules can be found, or anything related to finishes, things like that. And how to place them and format them. Again, let me scroll up as we have our different types of notes and how they would be used in our drawings. So having just general notes for the entire drawing set versus then notes on a specific sheet for it. And then included too in the standards are the different code conventions that would need to be applied based on what type of building it is and what's zoned on the building. So depending on if it is going to be a commercial building versus a residential residence is going to then have a huge play on that. So just the different codes and conventions that will have to be included in drawings in order for a drawing set to be able to pass through and the permit issued. All of that then is covered again in the CAD standards. So as the designer, you can ensure, okay, I have this stuff detailed in my drawing. I have those notes written in. I have it set up for XYZ. So that this way your permit is not being rejected in your plans. So that's included on the website, and then additionally there are the information related to code conventions for which sheets you should be able to find that information in. So if you have stuff related to accessibility and ADA information, that should be on the general notes sheet first off, and that it should be something that's written in notes for text versus your site grading. So that's the changes you're going to be making to the land in order to either build it up or excavate it in different areas for water runoff. That should be then on the civil plan sheet or the site plan sheet, and it should be included in the form of a picture versus any zoning uses should be included on the general sheet and should be in text. So some stuff is not going to be required for code. So for instance, if I am creating just again my small lake house for my personal residence, I don't need to have ADA formatted plans because it's my personal residence versus if I was designing a large school building, I would have to have that. But it's just a quick little access sheet of making sure that where that information should be located in plans so that this way you can get through the permit application that much faster. And this can be extremely helpful for if you're applying for anything net zero or LEED certified, because you're going to need to have information like energy usage or renewable requirements or anything that you are adding for renewable energy. So all of that stuff and where it's going to be located in your plans for when you're doing your LEED application will be helpful to have. Now, when it comes to applying the CAD standards in softwares like CAD, the one that we are going to cover in this course is AutoCAD. And so one big portion of the CAD standards are layers. And so layers, as I mentioned earlier, are used to reduce the prep time for drawings because we can automatically save them into template files. So there are a couple of different file types in AutoCAD, just like you have a Word document versus a PDF file. You have AutoCAD drawings and you have AutoCAD templates, and then you also have AutoCAD exchangeable files, which are ones then that we can export our line work into software like InDesign or Photoshop or in my case, I do a lot of it with Illustrator, so that way I can laser engrave things. So we have different ways that we can set drawings up. And if I have these different types of lines, these different layers, I can then have all of this information available for me in the software right when I get going. The purpose of having all of these different layers is so that in my one floor plan, I can then base off several different parts and have everything in just one comprehensive drawing, and then just turn different layers on or off using the light bulbs to either temporarily hide them, or then when I get the document ready to print, I can turn them off so that way they're not going to be printing in there. So we can change different settings related to these layers. And in the software itself, we typically are also going to apply them different colors for two reasons. One, it makes it a little easier to look at a drawing and understand the different parts or pieces when everything's in different colors. And two, for something called color plotting. So we'll use a color plot table to then assign the different colors, different thicknesses. So when I go to print a drawing, it's all going to print just in black, but it's going to associate different colors with different line weights, which will then help create our drawings to the standards a little bit easier. Now, what usually confuses a lot of students is when they first open up the template file that's provided in this course, is there are these layers in there and they have these wacky names. And that's because they're all named to the conventions set by the National CAD Standards. And they usually are going to consist of a letter that first just designates which area that one is in. So I'll go to the next slide. The first is kind of just like if we were designating, whether it's a civil or architectural, things like that. So we'll just have our first discipline. Maybe then it'll even have a second discipline one that will help say like these are architectural interiors. And then it'll have a 4-letter designator for just the major group. And then it'll have a minor group, and then a status, so whether or not it's currently like being used or not. So that all can be what's in those layers, and that's why if we go slides back, they all kind of have these weird names to them. So this is just referring that this is an architectural type of layer. It's in the annotation family, and that it's for a viewport. This is an architectural one in the annotation family, and it's for title blocks. This is in the annotation family, and it's for redlining. This is in the annotation, and it's for solid hatching versus pattern hatching versus dimensions versus depth points, which are layers that don't print. So all of these have a different meaning behind them, and eventually you do start to memorize what some of the meanings are. I kind of simplified this area for you a little bit, but of course, in the CAD standards, there are our different designators, as well as then if it's going to have like a little bit more information to the designator. So there's an Excel sheet that has that. The major groups, so how it's named. So if it's going to be something related to computers, and then any minor groups that might be included, and then if it has a status designator after the fact, so it could say that if it's new or if it's old. So when we look at, and let me see if I should have in here, unless I have it, maybe in my AutoCAD one. There we go. So I'm going to just open up a drawing in AutoCAD here. So it's again, for those of you who are retaking, it's your hauntingly familiar building. And so I've got my floor plan here, And I've got these different colors designating just different areas. So like the very outline of my building versus then the layer to represent my siding. So from here to here is my outside of my siding versus my plywood sheathing versus my stud versus my gypsum wallboard. So it's just the different layers of the wall because the wall is made up of a composite of material. My different symbols in my drawings, my title, um, my graphic scale, all of my dimensions. Even on a small building like this, it's a lot of information to look at. And so within my layers up here at the top, I can easily come in and turn some of the layers off. So I can turn off these annotation layers, and then I can easily see the building a bit better and work on adding in any features that I might need to change the walls around. Or if the solid hatching inside this wall is just kind of bugging me, I can quickly turn it off. Additionally, then when we go to get it ready to print, we can have it set that only some things show up in specific viewports for printing. So that's the purpose of using layers. Now, in a completely blank AutoCAD drawing, so if you're opening AutoCAD for the very first time, you're going to be opening up from a completely blank AutoCAD DWT. So this is a completely virgin drawing, and if I go to my layers, there are none. So by default, the layer system from the CAD standards is not included in AutoCAD because AutoCAD doesn't know necessarily what you're using its software for. It just knows that you are going to be creating sets of lines and curves. So the layers themselves in here were built into a template file that someone initially set up. So someone came in here, they went into layer properties, and they added in each one of those layers. Then they went to save their work as a drawing template so that this way we could easily just have those layers saved automatically. So on As You Learn, which let me just extend my session, there is a template file that you can access. So if you click on that, it'll download a template. And then if you click to open it and you have AutoCAD installed, it'll open up a blank AutoCAD drawing that'll have a lot of the layers pre-installed and then even some symbols as well. It doesn't have the entire list of symbols, but it has a good list for now of symbols that we can then use in our set of drawings. The thing to keep in mind with templates, though, with AutoCAD is that it's always going to open up new drawings based on the last template you ever used. So if I come back to the Start menu and I just hit New, it's just going to open up a blank version of the last template, which is the one that was provided on As You Learn. So it's always still going to have just this list of layers and those blocks. And maybe I don't want it set up that way. Maybe I just don't want to use architectural units and I don't want to make an architectural drawing. I want to use AutoCAD to do something else. And so just to keep that in mind, if you then on the Start page click on this arrow next to New, you can open up an ACAD DWT, which will open up a completely blank virgin drawing. But I don't want to get too much into AutoCAD today because I can't see your faces right now, but I bet there are some confused looks. That's okay. Here we go. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that. There we go. So we do have those just naming conventions, and there is the Excel sheet that goes over what some of them are. So if you're ever confused about what some of those names are or how to even name your layers, or maybe you're sent a file from someone else and they're using the CAD standards so you're unsure about some of the layers, You can either reference that sheet, or what I'll often do too is I'll just go to a layer and I'll turn something on and off just to see what goes away. So I'll just kind of toggle the light bulb next to it, and I'll say, oh, okay, that's what that layer is being used for. So that's one way to just reference it too. CAD blocks, as I mentioned before, are that reusable content, and so that's where we can have information like our furniture and our tags and our titles, and we can just have that to easily load into our documents from the library of just resources that's available on the CAD standards. You can also find different CAD blocks on the internet and just download them. Some of them are free, some of them cost money. So you can just Google search and see what you can download and cross your fingers that you don't get a virus. Not that many of them come with viruses, but sometimes I can't guarantee. So we have those available, and in AutoCAD you can find those. If you click on Insert, it'll show you ones that have recently been used. And then if you wanted to load other ones in, you can also go into your blocks from your library, and that's then when you can search kind of from your database that you might have. So I always recommend just kind of having a series of CAD blocks in just a folder on a flash drive or an external hard drive, so that way it can just kind of easily locate them. These are some ones that I downloaded off the internet, and so if I go click on this armchairs ones from the chairs I downloaded, it's going to say it's not found because it was in my downloads folder and I've deleted it from, this was probably like a couple of months ago. So you can absolutely download ones though if you want to or are interested in that. And we'll go over that a bit more when we go into AutoCAD more heavily. And then lastly, for how the standards can work in AutoCAD is we can also set objects up to print. So we can set up our different page sizes and our different title blocks and have that all preset in template files to print our drawings out easily, zoom in on different areas, set them to scale, and then have our different line types print with different line weights. So based on the color of the line in AutoCAD, it'll print either thicker or thinner in or on paper. So you can find in the template file that's provided on As You Learn right down here, a paper space layout with an 11 by 17 page with a title block already kind of filled out. You have to just double click on areas and you can fill it in with pieces of text as you see fit based on whatever you are working on. So you can just double click and change the information in there to say whatever you want and then click out of it. This right here is a viewport into the drawing area, and you can set up multiple sheets to have multiple viewports into different parts. So if I go back into my finished drawing here, you can see that I've got lots of different sheets down at the bottom. And what I have is a sheet set up for the foundation plan versus the floor plan, the elevations, the section view. All of that then is set up so that this way I can have everything here in my model space area of AutoCAD drawn full to size in the drawing area. So I don't have to worry about scaling anything because then I can go on paper and scale the different parts or pieces down. So the CAD standards can be very helpful for working with AutoCAD because it has a lot of that content we can use, and our layers when we start on AutoCAD in the next class are going to be a huge portion of helping us out too for that and our just various projects. So in the next lecture, we are actually going to start in a completely blank AutoCAD template. We're not going to start in this template file, but I figured in case any of you wanted to explore like what layers looked like and how they operated, I wanted to just share that file with you. For your big CAD project, I will share with you a template file that will help set everything up a little bit easier for you already, but just in case you're ever going to be in a situation where you need to start an AutoCAD file completely from scratch, I wanted to go over that with you as well. And so that is the CAD standards. That's the wrong thing. They are helpful and wonderful, and I encourage you to check them out and use some of the resources that I provided on As You Learn to help you have these information and the files on handy. Again, not something I'm expecting any of you to memorize, the 600 or so pages that would be available online, but you can definitely use the resource files to help you just reference things as you are working through your different documents.